Hey, friends. Welcome to Dishing on Divorce Next Chapter. I'm your host, Lisa Lisser, CEO and founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, relationships, and life transitions. You are listening to WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network Radio, Podcasts, and TV. So, in addition to being a divorce coach, I'm also a divorced mom of 3 now grown kids. I'm a recovering lawyer, a current educator, a spiritual counselor, and a divorce coach. And I'm committed to transforming the divorce experience for everyone involved. So, when thinking about our next chapter after divorce, our first question very often is, where will I live? The marital home is often the largest asset in a family's economy, and being financially able to continue to live in it comes fraught with questions that are both obvious and not so obvious. Additionally, the home comes built in with emotions about what the house represents, the community you've built, and where we want our kids to call home. Those issues, coupled with the worry about what we don't know, can grow into emotional decision monsters. Our guest today, Jeff Landers, can answer your questions. He is the expert in all things house related, especially when it comes to divorce. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Lisa. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm so glad to have you. Let me give our audience a little bit about your background,
Okay.
which is deep and thick. I love it. Jeff Landers is a seasoned real estate, mortgage, and divorce expert with 40 years of combined experience. He earned his BA in psychology from Columbia University and studied law at Pace University School of Law. He's also a certified divorce lending professional, CDLP, and a certified divorce financial analyst, CDFA, as well as a licensed real estate and mortgage broker. In 2010, Jeff founded Bedrock Divorce Advisors, working exclusively with women going through a financially complicated divorce. Dealing with the marital home is almost always a major issue in any divorce, and Jeff's strong background and know-how have guided many hundreds of women all over the U.S. through the complexities of their divorce. To focus exclusively on the marital home, Jeff also founded Divorce House Sense, whose mission is to help divorcing people who want to keep their marital home. And that's at divorcehousesense.com. Most recently, Jeff published his 7th book, How to Keep Your Marital House So You Can Move On, Not Move Out. And with all of that, welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
It's our pleasure to have you. The first thing I want to say is that's quite an impressive resume. You really are deep in the weeds of the house, and let's hope that we have a gardener who can get rid of the weeds, that you are that guy. But tell us a little bit about your story and how you got into this divorce support business.
Okay, so most of my background has been in real estate.
Okay.
And I think it was around 2007 or 2008. After working in real estate for decades, I sort of got bored of it. And I signed up, I think, as the oldest trainee at Wells Fargo Advisors to become a financial advisor, which I did. I went through their training program. And as I started getting clients, a bunch of them ended up going through a divorce, and the light bulb went on. And it was like, oh my God, what a great way to, differentiate myself. I mean, I never really never really thought about it. And I started to pursue and got my CDFA, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. And I stayed with Wells Fargo for roughly 2 years. And then I left in 2010 to start Bedrock Divorce Advisors. And I think to date, I've probably worked with close to 1,000 people all over the country, dealing with, mostly financially complicated divorces. And I would say in 85% of those cases, the marital home was either the largest asset or one of the largest assets. And that's why recently I formed Divorce House Sense to pretty much, not exclusively, but to have a strong focus on how to keep the marital home.
So that's a big question that so many people have. And I imagine your undergrad degree in psychology helps you as well when you're dealing
Always.
with like emotionally fraught situation.
Right.
So many people start out just in a panic that they're not going to be able to afford it. At the same time, they may be stubbornly saying, I don't care, I'm going to stick in the house, whatever it takes, not knowing what it takes.
Right.
So one of the things I saw that you mentioned is that you teach people things that their lawyers and their accountants may not even know. So tell us a little bit about that, because so often we rely on our lawyer to get the right deal for us because they have more knowledge than us, but they may not have this specialized knowledge. So share.
Well, absolutely. And as an attorney, and I'm a law school dropout, so I know that they don't really teach finance in law school. That's not a big part of it. And many divorce attorneys that I've spoken to, told me that one of the reasons that they became an attorney was because they were lousy in math. Well, but the reality is, once you deal with the children and visitation and parenting and all of that, the rest of the divorce is about money and the assets, which is money. In addition, there are so many changing regulations. I mean, mortgages are governed. You have the quasi-governmental agencies, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, all of those. Their requirements are constantly changing. A divorce attorney's forte is not in real estate and not in mortgages. So they may know certain things. I mean, quite honestly, I've been surprised how many divorce attorneys didn't even know some basic stuff that we could talk about later. And they were like, oh, really? Some do, but they don't know all the nuances, and you wouldn't expect them to. That's really not their job. And many mortgage lenders and mortgage brokers don't know all the nuances involved in divorce, because there's special situations in divorce and certain things that have to be done in a divorce situation that normally doesn't happen when you're applying for a mortgage or a refinancing.
Wow. So give us, give us some highlights, right? I want to know like your top 5 things that you believe clients should know when they're considering keeping the house.
Well, I think the most important thing, Lisa, is to bring someone like me in as early as possible. And the reason being, well, there's several reasons. Number one, you want to see if it's even feasible.
Right.
Okay, don't waste months and thousands on legal fees, going back and forth, negotiating, with your soon-to-be ex-spouse and their attorney over something that just might not happen. Why do that? It's better to find out earlier. Is it feasible? Do you have a good chance, no chance, or somewhere in the middle? That's number one. Number two, if you start early enough, okay, there's certain things that have to be in place for a specific amount of time. So if you start early enough, as you know, most divorces last, a year, sometimes several years. So you have plenty of time to put those things in place if you start early enough. The same thing, if you have some problems with your credit score or your credit report. Okay, if you have a year or more, that gives you plenty of time to start improving things to raise your credit score, which could be the difference between getting approved for a refinancing or not. Or even if you can be approved, it might lower your rates because your credit score is better. So
that's so interesting, because I know with some of my own personal experience that sometimes in the process of divorce, people play games. The moneyed spouse stops paying certain bills or stops paying a credit card, and
right.
the spouse who doesn't have access to that doesn't realize that their credit score is being impacted by these little games that are being played.
Right.
And so knowing that in advance, because that also impacts the game player's credit score as well. It's not just their soon to be ex-spouse.
Right. If it's joint credit, I mean, if you have, joint credit cards and someone doesn't pay the bill, absolutely, that'll ding both of your credit reports.
So this is like thinking about that at the beginning and just being transparent and say, look, we're both going to have to think about the house. Let's not play games with our credit cards. Our credit is so important. Both of us need to be in a good place when we move forward.
Exactly. And the two big things, Lisa, that you need to determine from the beginning, if you're the spouse that wants to keep the home, you need to typically do two things. One, you're going to have to buy the spouse that's not keeping the home. You're going to need to buy them out of their share of the equity in the home. So the first thing is to, find out how much equity you have in the home, which, people go to Zillow or Redfin, and it's usually very inaccurate, maybe for the back of an envelope type of thing. It's fine. It's better to get a professional appraisal done to find out what the value of the home is. Then you subtract any mortgages or liens that you have. What's remaining is the equity in the home. In most cases, doesn't have to be always. In most cases, that equity is divided 50-50. So if your house is worth $500,000 and you have a $300,000 mortgage, that means you have $200,000 worth of equity. Well, if you're going to buy your spouse out, somehow you've got to give him or her $100,000. So the next question is, where are you getting that $100,000 from? Now, if there are other assets and your share of those other assets are more than that $100,000, then maybe you can do that. Then it becomes the question, should you? Okay, do you want to use every last penny you have to buy out your spouse? And now you've got nothing left, and essentially you become house rich and cash poor. That could be a big problem. If you have $1 million, $100,000 is probably not going to hurt you that much, and you could do that. Also, it depends on the age. Okay, you may have, or your share of a 401k or some other retirement account might be very substantial, and you could use that money to buy out your spouse. But if you're 62 years old, do you really want to do it when retirement is right around the corner? So the advice that I would give to a 62-year-old is totally different than I give to a 42-year-old. So, it all is very case dependent of how to buy out your spouse's share. That's number one. Number two, if the mortgage is not already solely in your name, you're probably going to have to refinance, because the spouse that's leaving would really prefer not to have their name still on the mortgage, especially if you bought them out and they quit claimed the title to you. Okay, so now they're responsible on a mortgage for a house they no longer own. Okay, most people really don't want to do that. And if they do it, only for a limited amount of time. So the question is, okay, even if you have the money to buy out your spouse, are you able to qualify to refinance that mortgage? And that involves a whole bunch of things, whether you're working, if you're going to be dependent on alimony and child support. There's specific rules and timelines that you need to follow. And this is where I found, surprisingly, even a bunch of divorce attorneys have kind of missed the boat on that.
So is that something that may be the same in each state, or is that different in each state? The timelines and the rules about how long you have to have the alimony? What is that?
No, because that's again governed by those quasi-federal agencies, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and they're the ones that dictate. So I'll give you a perfect example, talking about alimony and child support. Mm-hmm. Okay, in most cases, before you even apply for a refinancing or a new mortgage, if you're going to use alimony and child support, towards the income that you need to qualify, you need to have received it on time and consistently for 6 months prior to you even applying for the mortgage. And then it has to continue for 36 months thereafter. So you're talking a minimum of 42 months. Now, here's where some of the issues come in. Let's say you have a 16-year-old child and in your state, the age of emancipation is 18. And let's say you're getting $10,000 a month in child support. As far as the lender's concerned, that $10,000 is zero. Why? Because your child is going to be emancipated in 2 years when child support is going to stop, and the lenders require 36 months of continuous. So it doesn't matter how much you're getting per month, that, according to the lender, is worth zero. So I've reviewed many settlement agreements that state something to the effect that the person that wants to keep the home has 90 or 120 days to refinance the mortgage. And if they can't, the house has to be put up for sale. Well, if you haven't started receiving your alimony and child support and you need to do that for 6 months, then you automatically lose, because the settlement agreement only gave you 90 or 120 days. So now, look, if you're in an amicable situation and you go to your ex-spouse and say, look, this was a little screwed up, I need a little, 3 months more. Maybe if you're in an amicable situation, that's okay. But if it's, if it's, not a pleasant situation, it might be too bad. Sell the house. I want my money.
Yeah.
So
and it could be, I won't say a trick, but it could be sort of like a workaround where the spouse really didn't want to give you the house.
Right.
And knowing that, that's, the spouse might not know it. The lawyer should be responsible to know that. And that's what's really,
well, that's usually, the first basic things. There's so many other things that have timelines, and that really gets into the weeds that you wouldn't normally expect a divorce attorney to know, because again, real estate and mortgages aren't their forte. But I mean, the basic stuff about, the 6 months prior to applying for alimony and child support and the 36 months thereafter should be pretty basic knowledge.
Yeah, I would think so.
But it's not. I mean, a lot do, but trust me, I've come across quite a few that didn't, and those settlement agreements proved it. Okay, how can you put in, you've got 90 days, and I'm sure you've seen that also. 90 days, and if you can't refinance within 90 days, you have to put the house up for sale.
Yeah, that's a real challenging one. And so thanks for highlighting that pothole for my audience.
It's a big one.
We're about 18 minutes in, so we're going to take a quick 30-second break, and then we'll be back with Jeff Landers. And we're back with Jeff Landers. Jeff is the author of How Moving On, Not Moving Out, How to Keep the Marital House. And I want us to dig deep into that right now. Like what? So I read from your bio that this is your 7th book, and many of them were focused on divorce and the marital house. So what does this book have that you felt was more resources for the audience that needs it?
So this book, Divorce House Sense, How to Keep Your Marital Home So You Could Move On, Not Out, is only about how to keep the marital home, if that's what you want to do. Now, I do have a couple of chapters if you have to sell and how to do that, because, it may prove to be unfeasible for you to do that. I have, a couple of chapters on how to deal with a difficult spouse, and if you have a spouse that's trying to sabotage you and all of that. But this book really gets into the nitty-gritty about how to buy out your spouse, how to negotiate that, how to come up with the right amount of qualified income and what you need in order to qualify for a mortgage, whether it's your income, whether it's your debt to income ratio. I mean, it really is real estate mortgage specific. My other books are all about the financial aspects of divorce. So it includes all the assets. How do you deal with stock options and restricted stock? How do you divide, stock portfolios? What if there's a closely held business? What if there's, expensive artwork or antiques or things like that? It talks about alimony. It talks about child support. It talks about equitable distribution states and community property states. I mean, I go into, the whole 9 yards. What's the date of separation? How's that determined? So it really, and especially the first few books were sort of a primer on, let's face it. I mean, unless you've been divorced a couple of times, most people are doing this for the first time. They have no clue what to expect, what's going to happen. Maybe they were blindsided. They didn't even know anything. They don't know anything about, the family finances or investments. So those beginning books that I wrote is really to give you a very, very good overview of what's involved in all of that. And then I wrote a book about, stay-at-home moms and what happens with that. Another book was about what if your spouse is hiding assets? How do you discover that? And then one of the books was, okay, now that you're divorced or almost divorced, what do you need to think about post-divorce financial planning? So it really sort of covered the gamut from like, oh my God, I'm being divorced, or I'm thinking about getting divorced. Where do I even begin to, okay, I've gone through the process, and what do I think about my financial future? But this book, again, is just focusing on that specific asset of the marital home.
So how do you talk to people when they have this emotional connection to the house that isn't really able to be supported by the financial picture?
Well, I mean, one of the taglines from my company, Bedrock Divorce Advisors, was think financially, not emotionally. So, so even though I have a BA in psychology, I'm not a therapist. I mean, and people are tied. Look, there is emotions in the house. It was a big purchase. Maybe you're proud of it. Maybe you helped decorate it. Maybe, you built the deck in the back. You raised your kids there. I mean, there are a lot of emotions. I mean, most people are not tied emotionally to their stock portfolio. It's just an asset. The home is where you live, where, you have family get-togethers and holidays. So there is the emotion. But I want people to be careful, as much as they want it. You talk about overextending yourself, okay? You may want to drive a Rolls Royce, okay, but, are you going to sell all your other assets in order to do that when, you can't afford to put gas in the, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So, and that's part of my job, okay, is to start from the very beginning. Okay, let's look at your assets. Let's look at your income. Let's have some reasonable expectations of what you might get in the divorce. Now, if you're starting at the beginning, okay, at the very beginning of negotiations, you don't know yet how much alimony you might get. You don't know how much child support. I mean, child support's a little bit easier because every state has a formula and you can sort of figure that out. But I mean, you could get an idea from your attorney, or I've gone through enough of these cases, even though, I can't give legal advice, but from a financial point of view, we could make certain assumptions that, okay, these are what all your assets are. And if you divide it 50-50, this is what you have left over, and you have plenty of money to buy out your spouse's share of the equity. And then, okay, can you afford to refinance? Well, I don't know. Maybe you have a great job and you're making $300,000 a year, and you don't even need to count on the alimony or child support. I mean, the truth of the matter is, lenders are not allowed to, it's actually illegal for them to ask you if you're getting alimony or child support, or even if you're divorced. Okay. You're the one that has to bring it up and say, I'm getting divorced. I'm expecting so much in alimony and child support. Will that be enough to qualify? So you're the one that has to raise it. The lender can't ask you. It's actually, like I said, illegal. So if you have a great job, you may not need that. But it depends, of course, on the size of your mortgage. I mean, you may have a good job, but, if you have $1 million mortgage, probably $100,000 salary is not going to cut it.
Right.
So you still may need to rely on that alimony and child support. And then again, we have to figure out, did you have the 6 months before, the 36 months thereafter? But there are ways to negotiate, which is why I like coming in as early as possible.
Right.
Things are already done. Let's say you need more income. Well, instead of taking, 50% of the 401k, maybe you take 30% in return for, getting another $2,000 a month in alimony for X period of time. So there's horse trading that could go on. And if you start sooner, you don't want to come in at the end when everything's already been agreed to and sort of finalized. And basically, I would be saying, wait a second, what you have here is not going to work. We've got to start all over. Okay. The lawyers will throw up their hands and go, are you kidding me?
Yes.
And people don't want to now spend, thousands of dollars more in legal fees to basically start the negotiation, especially if it was acrimonious. So and that's the other thing. I mean, if it's a totally acrimonious situation and you and your soon-to-be ex can't agree on anything, and you go to court, the judge may very well say, you know what, just sell the house and divide the proceeds. Okay, it will take a certain amount of cooperation with the other spouse to come, especially if you're going to do the horse trading. I mean, if it's acrimonious and he or she say, no, I'm not doing anything. I don't care if you keep it, sell it, whatever. In fact, I prefer you to do that. That might happen. You can't necessarily force the issue, and a judge will typically take the easier way out and say, just sell it. In fact, many divorce attorneys will do that. Like, why go through all of this? Just sell it, split the assets, find something smaller. You really don't need a house with, 5 bedrooms and 3 baths anyway. So
what, you're sharing, everybody has an opinion on what you need and what you can use.
Right.
And your book is focused on those people who are committed to keeping the house.
If possible, yes.
And in many cases, people, as you said, people don't know. Especially if they bring you in at the beginning, but then they can plan. And also then they can learn what you're sharing is by getting that real estate professional in early, people start getting an education.
Right.
And until they start knowing the information, they're just spinning in what they don't know.
Right.
And then I see in so many of my clients so often during the process and at all stages, like the worrying about the things they don't know. So this book and this your planning out is really a job that is focused on learn what you need to know so that you can make the educated decision. And then these are ways that you can effectuate what you want.
Totally. And it's even applicable. Let's say you can't keep the house, but you want to buy, maybe a condo or something. Okay. But the same rules are going to apply. If you're going to use alimony and child support, you still need the 6 months before and the 36 months thereafter. If you have too much debt, your DTI, your debt to income ratio, needs to be brought down. So a lot of the techniques of how to negotiate your settlement, okay, will still be applicable even if you can't keep the home, because if you're going to buy something smaller, you still need a good credit score. You still need qualified income. Okay, fine. You sold the house and now, you were just able to split the proceeds, so you don't have to worry about buying out your spouse. But you're still going to need to make sure that you have that qualified income in order to qualify for a new mortgage. So
something that sounds really significant when I think about it in terms of negotiating is that whether you keep the house or not, you may need 6 months to a year agreed upon in the house so that at least you have the history of alimony. If you're going to be using alimony to pay for the rest of your life, if you haven't worked, then perhaps what the best takeaway from today can be negotiate at least a year in the house so that you have the time to get the historic alimony payments on time.
Well, you do need at least the 6 months. I mean,
Right.
that's the minimum. Now, one of the things I talk about in the book is that one of the ways to start the clock ticking, so you don't have to wait 6 months after it's finalized. In many cases, you could get some temporary alimony or temporary child support while your case is pending, so at least you could start the clock ticking. But again,
If
that
you're talking about an acrimonious divorce, then that's a little bit hard to do. And that also takes generally motion practice, which is going to cost money. And there's a lot that's wrapped up in that.
right.
But
And many divorce attorneys will say, don't rock the boat. You know, he or she is still paying the mortgage and still paying the real estate taxes. Don't come and ask them for temporary support now because they just may like throw a fit and stop paying everything. And I understand it. If it's an acrimonious situation, that always makes things more difficult. If it's amicable, you can do that. You know, once you explain to your spouse, this is why, you know, it would be great if we could start payments now. But, you know, if you're ready to kill each other, that's it's not going to work.
But at the same time, what you can share in this negotiation process is that in order for you to get what you want, which may be for me to buy you out or to sell the house,
right,
you need at least 6 months of you paying me on time, which
right,
also encourages the being paid on time,
right,
which is also often a game that
right.
doesn't.
On time and consistent.
Yeah.
So if someone pays you this month but doesn't pay you next month and pays you double the month after, that's not good enough. It starts the clock all over again. So it's the consistent and on time.
How would it work if someone is getting a lump sum alimony payment?
Well, that doesn't count as income. I mean, you know, no. So in the book, I talk about ways to convert an asset like a lump of money into income. So there are ways to do that where you could generate that qualified income from a lump sum. So and there you know types of mortgages that will take into account. It's called an asset depletion mortgage, where you know you could use a portion of a stock portfolio and all of that to qualify. Because let's face it, I mean that's true with you know older people that are retired. They might have a lot of money, but outside of Social Security, they may have no income coming in.
Right.
But yet they're still able to you know get a mortgage. So there are ways to do that.
That's good to know. And for all of the audience, it's important to recognize that trade judgment for curiosity here, right? Like we really need to stop judging like what I can do, what I can't do, what he did, what she did. Now it's time to like get into the weeds, the nitty-gritty, and say, if this is what I really want, what do I need to know and what do I need to do? And what do I need to accomplish? So you have like, you know, 3 different categories of getting educated up. What are your action steps? And how do you qualify? All of those things are essential when people are thinking that what they want for sure is to keep the house. So that's really great information for you to leave our audience with. So you actually have offered my audience a discount code for your book, Divorce House Sense. So why don't you share it with my audience?
Yeah, so if the book is not available on Amazon, only on my website, as opposed to my other books, which are available on Amazon. But if you go to Divorce House Sense, and that's Sense, SENSE.com, when you check out to buy the book is normally $7.99. It's a, you know, electronic. If you enter the code DOD, you'll get $2 off. So basically, you could get the book for $5.99.
That's great. That's a resource that every divorce professional should have as well.
Oh, for sure.
You know, it's something that, you know, when I finish the book, I will be armed with so much more information to help educate my clients, and that's priceless.
Absolutely.
So So thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing your wisdom with us.
Oh, my
And,
pleasure. Thank you.
it's really important for people to feel like they're not alone when they're going through the divorce process. And when we talk about assets and we talk about equitable distribution and we talk about support, like these words just float around in this sort of dark haze. So if we can like shine some light on a topic as significant and as important as the house, we're going to go a long way toward helping people move through their divorce with more confidence, more clarity, and more courage.
Absolutely.
So
Well said, Lisa.
thank you, Jeff. Thank you. And for my audience, please tell them how they can get a hold of you.
Oh, you could the best thing to do is just to go to the website, divorcehousesense.com. You could email me directly at Landers, Landers, at divorcehousesense.com.
Great. And you can find me at lzlcoaching.com and email me directly, Lisa at lzlcoaching.com. Jeff, thank you again for being an outstanding guest and sharing such great information.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure.